Session resumed. The majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to open the consideration of the proposed budget for the Department of Public Works and Highways. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. Majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Romeo Momo to sponsor the proposed budget for the Department of Public Works and Highways.
The distinguished sponsor is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize acknowledge the family of the Department of Public Works and Highways, our very esteemed Secretary Mark Villar, Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo, Undersecretary Catalina Cabral, Undersecretary Emil Sadain, Undersecretary Eduardo Ramos Jr., Undersecretary Rafael Yabut, ASEC Marichu Palafox, ASEC Antonio Molano Jr., ASEC Eugenio Pipo Jr., ASEC Mel John Versosa. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The Department of Public Works and Highways, headed by Secretary Mark Villar, welcome to the House of the People. Majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Janette Garin of 1st District of Iloilo. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 1st District of Iloilo is hereby recognized. The gentle lady from the 1st District of Iloilo is hereby recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you, but I am awaiting a slide from my office. Can I request that I be instead the second interpolator?
Majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Arlene Brosas from Gabriela Party List for her interpellations. Arlene Brosas.
Yes. The distinguished lady, honorable lady from Gabriela Party List is hereby recognized.
Mr. Speaker,
Majority floor leader.
due to technical difficulties, may I withdraw my motion and instead move to recognize Honorable Rodrigo Abelnerosa of the 2nd District of Cebu City. So move, Mr. Speaker.
2nd District.
2nd District of Cebu.
The gentleman from the 2nd District of Cebu City is hereby recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Majority Leader, Honorable Sponsor, our good friend, colleague, Congressman Momo Sr. May I beg the indulgence of the Speaker and of the Honorable Sponsor to have a little time to watch a short video presentation of what happened in the city of Cebu yesterday. May I ask the footage to be played now?
Gladly, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, it's my honor to watch this presentation of our distinguished colleague.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sponsor. It's entitled Flood, Flood, Flood. That sounds familiar to all of us. It sounds like build, build, build. But this flood, 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 especially in the city of Cebu, is building rivers out of our streets. So you can see We would like to credit this footage to the original owners. I just plucked this from the social media posts. These are our major streets. This is the main commercial district in the uptown of the city of Cebu. So if it looks like that in the uptown, you can imagine how it is in the midtown and worse in the downtown and even worse in the residential areas of the city. So our streets, our avenues, our boulevards are turned into rivers. And the cars, our vehicles, are turned into boats, amphibian cars. Sorry, there's no audio to this, because these are taken from cell phones of our constituents. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, honorable sponsor, our proponents from the Department of Public Works and Highways. I hope that spells what I am to say this afternoon. Take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, honorable sponsor, to highlight the fact that the city of Cebu is in dire need of the much-needed support in terms of infrastructures from the Department of Public Works and Highways. We should take note that DPWH, when we talk of the budget of DPWH, it means a lot to us, representatives of the different districts of our country, because we are the ones who work hard to work with the national agencies, to work with the DPWH in advancing our causes, our needs in our respective
142?
districts.
Anong amount?
Let us not also forget that it is because of the budget of the DPWH that caused the downfall of the former speaker and the issues surrounding about the close associates and allies of the former speaker. While the former speaker, Cayetano, if to mention this once again, together with his close allies, are wallowing in tens of billions of DPWH allocations for their districts. Sad to say, the two districts of Cebu City, which contributed substantially to the national wealth, are afforded only about less than $500 million
City lang ito.
for each of these two districts of the city of Cebu. Compare this with what we have heard about the 11 billion for Camarines Sur, through the courtesy, through the clout of former Deputy Speaker El Rey Villafuerte. Compare this to the reported 8 billion for Taguig, courtesy through the clout of the former Speaker Cayetano. And this, despite our submission of sufficient proposals in order to address what we have just seen, the serious flooding problems perennially hounding the city of Cebu. It is sad to note that DPWH has generously accommodated 500 million for the iconic Capitol building of CAMSOR, the 250 billion, or rather million, 250 million for the sports complex of CAMSOR, para bagang ang katapat lang ng budget ng Cebu City ay Capitol building at sports complex lang ng CAMSOR. As the representative of the 2nd District of Cebu City, I vehemently protest. This is a big insult and an utter affront, not just to the city of Cebu, but most importantly, to the people of the city of Cebu. If this issue on the inequitable, unequal, unfair allocation of the DPWH budget has caused the downfall of the former Speaker, Alan Peter Cayetano, for all we know, this might become also the cause of the political downfall, hope it won't, of our very dear, very good friend, Secretary Mark Villar. So, may I just remind DPWH, it is your primary duty to help ensure that public infrastructures are necessary in national productivity. Public infrastructures necessary in national productivity should be made sure that these are in place and well-maintained and in tip-top shape all the time. And in our case, this is necessary to help the city of Cebu continue to be the hub of tourism and the center of commerce outside of Metro Manila. And this is necessary for Cebu City to continue to contribute tremendously to the country's gross national product and to our national wealth. So, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Sponsor, we beg that whatever abuses that may have been committed, please, let us rectify this. We still have the time why we are rushing to complete, to finish this budget for 2021. We beg that justice be given to our districts, the 2nd District of the City of Cebu, as well as the 1st District of Cebu City. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable Sponsor.
Thank you, gentleman from Cebu City, the Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Janette Garin of the 1st District of Iloilo. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from the 1st District of Iloilo is hereby recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Sponsor. Magandang gabi po sa ating DPWH family. I hope that we will have the indulgence to be heard and work on possible policy measures that will actually help the delivery of jobs and employment, especially that we are facing a pandemic. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, Honorable Sponsor, noon po kasi ng mga nakaraang araw, ang dami po nating mga kasamahan ang nagtanong na bakit po paulit-ulit na sinasabi build, build, build. Jobs, jobs, jobs. At tama naman po, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, kailangan natin ng patuloy na magbigay ng gobyerno ng trabaho dahil marami ang nawalan ng trabaho at marami ang naghihirap, marami ang nagugutom dala ng pandemya. I agree, this is not something that we expected, but this is something that the government is responding to. Allegedly, there is a 135 billion peso funded project, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, that that remains unfunded. Can our honorable sponsor attest to this? Mr. Speaker, can I request for a few minutes suspension?
Session suspended. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Janette Garin to continue her interpellation.
The lady from the 1st District of Iloilo is recognized.
I had a pending question, Mr. Speaker. May I hear the response from our honorable sponsor?
Will you please repeat the question, my dear colleague?
Mr. Speaker, ang tanong ko po kanina, kasi yun po ang karamihan ng hinaing ng ating mga miyembro noong mga nakaraang araw, the past weeks, and the past months. Paulit-ulit po na sinasabi, build, build, build. Jobs, jobs, jobs. At tama naman po, kailangan nating magbigay ng trabaho, kabuhayan, at proyekto because no other than the government should help our people who have lost jobs, who have to feed their family, who have to face this pandemic. So my question to our honorable sponsor, distinguished colleagues, honorable speaker, is there a truth that 135 billion allegedly worth of projects contained in the General Appropriations Act remains unfunded?
Well, if you are referring to for letter release, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, yes, this is still unfunded right now, worth 130 billion.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, what is the reason for this? Wala po ba tayong pera? Meron po ba itong solusyon? I mean, how can we coin and align, build, 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 jobs, 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 work, work, work? If we have 135 billion worth of projects in the General Appropriations Act, but we cannot put our words into actions.
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleague, the 131 billion, not really 135, 131 billion FLR were already issued SARO. However, the remaining 50% of this is still awaiting for a MICA. It was I think it was agreed and understood between DBM and DPWH that MICA will be released probably before the end of October.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, can we have an assurance from the Department of Public Works and Highways that this is already being processed and is just awaiting release?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, according to the Secretary of Public Works and Highways, they are now preparing MICA individually as required by DBM. In fact, they have already submitted the listings with the appropriate amount to DBM, but it was returned because they were instructed that individual MICA be prepared by them. So according to to the Department of Public Works and Highways, they can submit it per project. There are more than 10,000 EPLR projects that they are now preparing, and it will be submitted within this month. Once received by DBM, DBM will approve it and return it back to them for our implementation.
So, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, out of the 135 billion, is the total amount being processed?
Yes, the whole 135 billion.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, this amount will be funded. And before the year ends, build, jobs, in response to the pandemic will really happen.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, my distinguished colleague, all of these first or later release projects with SARO and MICA had already been bid out by the regional and district offices or the implementing offices. And they are awaiting SAROs or partial SAROs were already released to the implementing offices. However, as a part of the requirement, they cannot award the whole contract or the whole project unless MICA is available. So in the absence of one, SARO and MICA, they cannot award it. So they are just waiting now for the release of MICA because they have the SARO already. And once released, the IOs or the implementing offices will start awarding, perfecting contract, and start actual construction.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, may I just reiterate that the assurance of the DPWH family, and not just the sponsor of the said agency, is that MICAs are being processed and are surely funded.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
And this is a commitment in compliance with the provision of the Bayanihan II law, which actually directs the DPWH and other government agencies to expedite the implementation of infrastructure programs and projects to generate local employment and stimulate the local economy.
That is right, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. That is provided in Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2 also.
With that assurance, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, and again, that's for the record, kasi mahirap pong umaasa yung ating mga kababayan, yung ating mga constituents ng trabaho, at kung hindi naman mabigyan, why is it that these projects are again listed in the proposed budget of the Department of Public Works and Highways for the proposed budget for year 2021?
Well, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, what is to be released by DBM to the DPWH is just a multi-year contractual authority, or MICA. It is just an authority. It is not an allocation, or not a SARO, and therefore there is a need to put it in the budget of 2021 to be sure that it will be funded fully as reflected in 2020 GE.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have 135 billion worth of infrastructure projects listed under the General Appropriations Act of the Republic of the Philippines, meaning legislated, supposedly funded for the year 2020. Unfortunately, it was not funded because of the pandemic. Does that mean, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, that our country does not have money anymore?
I think there is actually, Mr. Speaker, but that is not enough to fund the whole COVID requirements.
So out of the 135 billion, Mr. Speaker, honorable sponsor, magkano po ba ang mapopondohan in total?
Ang kinuha natin, the total allocation or the total projects that were affected has a total allocation of 270. However, of the 270, 135 billion of that was already released to the implementing agency, that is Department of Public Works and Highways, in form of ISARO. The remaining balance, therefore, is for 2021 of the half of 170 is covered by MICA with the assurance that this will be funded in the General Appropriations Act of 2021. And that is why there is a MICA, because MICA is a contractual authority for the implementing agency to implement the project. But it also guarantees that the appropriations will be provided in the next General Appropriations Act. And that is
Mr.
year
Speaker,
2020.
distinguished sponsor, what is the legal basis of such an act? If you have a multi-year contractual allotment to fund projects, is it legal to bid 270 billion worth of projects, but only fund 135 billion worth of projects? And to mention the fact that the MICA was not issued prior to the bidding of the total of 270 billion projects.
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, Bayanihan 1 or Republic Act 11469 under Section 4, it says, notwithstanding any law to the contrary, direct the discontinuance of appropriated programs, projects, and activities, or PAPs, of any agency of the Executive Department, including government-owned or controlled corporations, in fiscal year 2019 and 2020 General Appropriations Act, whether released or unreleased, the allotment for which remain unobligated and utilize the savings generated therefrom. Now, in the last part of this certain Section 4, notwithstanding the provision of this Act, the discontinued program, activity, or project may be revived at any time after the national emergency has ceased. And notwithstanding Section 67 of Republic Act number 11645 or the GAA of 2020 may be revived and proposed for funding within the next 2 fiscal years. That is the basis, therefore, or the legal authority why it has been included in the succeeding General Appropriations Act.
So, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, can we have a copy in writing of the DPWH legal office that this act is within legal bounds?
There is, yes. If you're referring to
Can I
it,
have a copy of that, Mr. Speaker?
this is Bayanihan 1 Act, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Yeah, because, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, I have here a copy of Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2, and in portions of these two laws, it specifically mentions provisions that these projects should have been funded this year.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Public Works and Highways will submit to our honorable colleague the position paper of the department as to what authority the augmentation as well as the inclusion of the FLR projects in 2021.
Mr. Speaker, earlier our distinguished sponsor said that 85% of the total amount has to be sacrificed and will be unfunded this year simply because there are other priorities. Is he implying that we have bigger priorities rather than job provision and employment for Filipinos who are now in poverty and who are now hungry because they lost their jobs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, even our Constitution provides that during calamities, the President is authorized to realign projects.
Speaker, with due
And
courtesy
therefore, and
to our
therefore-
distinguished sponsor, I am not questioning the authority to realign. I fully agree with that. And we know the legality of that. My question is, are we saying that providing jobs, reducing poverty, hunger, and unemployment is least of the priorities of our government? Because 85% of the total budget that could have augmented the DPWH Build program has to be sacrificed to fund other programs.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, I think the government is trying to balance the need of our people in terms of jobs and also the need for the response for this pandemic. So it does not mean that because we reduce appropriations and fund it for a pandemic, it does not mean that the government has abandoned already its target for more jobs and support to our...
Would we know, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, where did the 85% of the 270 billion, or where did the 270 billion went?
It is actually, Mr. Speaker, your distinguished colleague, it is not 185, but it is 135 billion that was withheld because that was used to fund the needs of pandemic.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, with due courtesy, using the funds for pandemic is a very broad answer. Can we get the specifics? Because if we are talking about prioritizing, if we are talking about issues that we have to prioritize and to balance COVID response, then we should know that depriving millions of people of jobs, livelihood, and opportunity to have food in their table at this time of pandemic was sacrificed for other equally important programs. That's why my question, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, is direct. Where did the 135 billion go?
Well, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, the Department of Public Works and Highways just follow the directive coming from DBM. The DBM says that this certain amount be transmitted to them or returned to them, and therefore they follow it. As to the use of these funds, I am sorry, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, I think DPWH is not a privy as to the uses of this.
So, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, wala pong klaro kung saan ito ginamit.
Actually, the Department of Public Works and Highways is not really privy to the utilization of this fund. I think DBM or other agency, DBM knows this. I think they are the one that is more knowledgeable about the use of this particular.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, can we get the commitment of the Department of Public Works and Highways that they will extract from the Department of Budget and Management where these funds went.
The Department of Public Works and Highways, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, promised to request or extract this report from DBM.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, sponsor, for that. Dahil mukhang hindi po tama na basta-basta na lang tayong papayag na ibalik yung pera sa isang ahensya if it will mean millions of people losing jobs, if it will mean taking away that opportunity wherein we can provide food on the table, basic necessities at this time where people are not only grappling about fear and their problem of mental health, but this is the only time na walang ibang masasandalan ang taong bayan kundi gobyerno. Dito lang po sumasandal ng regularidad ng trabaho at isang ahensyang may kakayanang magsweldo at magbigay ng hanap buhay sa ating mga kababayan. We cannot just say, yes, we are giving back 135 billion to the coffers of the Department of Budget and Management, but we simply do not know where was it spent. Was it worth it? Baka naman nasakripisyo natin ang trabaho at pera na dapat ay nagbibigay ng job, build, at baka naman napunta yon sa mga pangangailangan na hindi naman dapat inuna. My point, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, that's why we're appealing to the DPWH family, because we believe in the capacity and the capability of the Honorable Secretary, having been a member of this Congress for a long time, and having been a public servant and even a philanthropist for a long time, that he believes and he understands how it is to be hopeless when you have no food on your table, how it is to be hopeless that we have many people coming back home na yung ating mga OFWs ay nagiging farmers. But look at the farming opportunities. It needs investment. Mas malaki pa ang kita ng isang Pilipino na nagtatrabaho sa isang construction site ng DPWH kesa na magtanim siya ng palay dahil wala namang malaking suporta ang kagawaran ng agrikultura. We are appealing to the DPWH family, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, to please exercise the mandate that job provision and build programs should not be secondary to other programs which are not really that important. Moving forward, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, my next question is, will it be possible for the DPWH family, kasi kayo po ang isang susi na pwedeng magbigay ng pag-asa sa ating mga kababayan. Magpapasko po, marami po ang nagugutom, maraming walang trabaho, maraming negosyo ang nagsara. Ang kailangan nila, oportunidad para na magtrabaho. Will it be possible for DPWH to repeatedly make representations with DBM, to partially release, and even with the Department of Finance and the economic team, to possibly fund the 135 billion this year, because we want our Filipino communities to experience the spirit of Christmas. Hindi po ba pwedeng hingian na lang sila ng pondo? Because jobs means life. Jobs means food. Jobs means survival. And the only biggest employer of our country now is our government. And the only biggest opportunity for them to earn on a monthly basis are government projects. Meron naman po tayong DSWD, pero pantawid lang yan. Meron po tayong tupad, but that's only 10 days of work on a 1-month perspective. Bakit po ba hindi pwedeng maging matapang ang DPWH at sabihin, don't sacrifice, build. Because building and infrastructure projects is actually our people's lifeline now in this post-pandemic era. Can we get that assurance, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, from the DPWH family?
Mr. Speaker, my distinguished colleague, I fully agree with what our distinguished colleague has said. In fact, this representation represented the construction workers whose jobs rely really on the availability of construction projects. In fact, this representation is the one that requested DPWH to resume, right after the ECQ, to resume construction works in their different projects. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, the Department of Public Works and Highways have repeatedly requested DBM for the immediate release of the available SAROs for these FLRs. And it was just last week where the whole 135 billion was released to them. So all the 135 billion pesos SARO were now on the hands of the Department of Public Works and Highways.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished sponsor. Let me move on to a second topic. We in the minority, konti lang po kasi kami. And much as we want to have a stronger voice, we understand that that voice cannot usually be heard. We have one member from the minority, Congressman Guya, who wanted to help his constituencies. And I've opened this up in the minority budget briefing. Kasi syempre, when you go there and explain to your people that that project is funded dahil ikaw naman boses nila, nakakalungkot po nang nalaman lang namin during the minority budget briefing that this project was not funded despite being listed in the GAA simply because somebody in the Department of Public Works and Highways made an error in typing. That the project is a road leading to his constituencies. However, that project was listed under buildings. We conveyed this several times, and I actually don't want to bring that matter to the floor. However, we find it unfair that up to this point of time, we don't have an answer to that question being repeatedly asked by Congressman Guya.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, can we be supplied, the Department of Public Works and Highways be supplied with that particular project?
We did that several times already, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. And I believe the district engineer and even the regional director are fully aware of that. I had probably more than 50 calls to them, not because of myself, but simply because I cannot bear one of our members being unheard.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, so it is in my understanding that this particular request or project was submitted by the district engineer to the regional director of Region 6. Am I right, this honorable colleague?
Ibig po sabihin, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, may project, nakalista, napondohan, at nagulat siya bakit tinatanong ng tao na hindi mai implement. And he was told it has to be reverted dahil na mali po ang pag-type. Instead na road, nilagay siya sa building. My point here, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, is that kung merong mali, bakit hindi kinorek? Bakit napakadali na parang just with a whiff of our finger, binabalik ka agad natin? Hindi naman po yun kalakihan. But we just find it unjust that members of the minority, nangyari ba to dahil miyembro siya ng minorya, which I do not believe? Or is this a process in the department that should be corrected? Kasi sayang po yung proyekto eh. Mawawala lang na parang bula dahil daan siya pero nailista under sa building.
Well, Department of Public Works and Highways promised to help and submit this request to DBM for possible funding.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, our information was not from DBM. It was an error in encoding under the Department of Public Works and Highways. Kaya nga po patuloy po akong tawag ng tawag, not because it's in my turf, but simply because we have to be the voice of our co-colleague in the minority. And can we hear from the distinguished sponsor, Honorable Speaker, ano po ba ang solusyon dito?
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, if this is for modification, the role is that if it is a request for modification, the approval of the request will still be done by DBM. So the Department of Public Works and Highways will process its request, but it will be submitted to DBM for them to act on this, whether to approve or disapprove, Mr.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. But can I please request the DPWH family to investigate why this happened? Yun lang naman ang pakiusap ng aming kasamahan. It's not because he is just very nice and very kind na hindi nagagalit, hindi na po natin haharapin. And simply because he is a member of the party list that he is representing, hindi po natin uunahin. Because all of them have their own priorities. Moving forward, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleague, I had other concerns na ipinarating kay Yusek Momo, kay Yusek Cabral, repeatedly to the DPWH, na kung pwede naman, yung mga priority projects na hindi naman kalakihan at naaprubaran ng mga miyembro ng minorya, ay wag naman basta-basta pabayaan. And if there are requests for realignment, that will not be a problem, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. But please inform that that project will have to be realigned so that hindi po kami ang nababalikan ng aming mga kasamahan sa minorya. Mahirap po kasi na kung lumalapit, you can actually tell us yes or no. But it's very difficult when you give us a deaf ear. Moving forward, Mr. Speaker, distinguished
Representative Garin,
colleague.
you're given 1 more minute.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I please have the slide that, can I present one photo? Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, ganito po ba ang highway na ginagawa ng Department of Public Works and Highway? Kasi sa tagal ko sa gobyerno, biglang nagulat po ako na yung daan na ganyan, biglang lumiko. I mean, I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, if I'm myopic, but apparently, is this a new design of the Department of Public Works and Highways? Are these the current trends in building roads? Will this make that area accident prone? Bakit po kailangan nating itabingi? Bakit po parang ganyan ang itsura? This is in the congressional district that I represent, where actually the family of Secretary Villar is very close to. That's why I believe that the leadership of the Department of Public Works and Highways will not and will never allow this. Hindi ito papayagan ng liderato ng DPWH because they stand by quality. Kaya ang tanong ko, bakit po ba tila bulag ang DPWH Region 6 sa mga ganitong project? Why do we have to make a road, a curved road, that will be prone to accidents? Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, I agree that sometimes in a huge office, you cannot police everybody. But Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, this is the output of non-coordination when you have generals on the ground who refuse to talk to us legislators. Because even in the allocation of resources, we have districts with so much need, but ending up with nothing. We have districts with maybe lesser need. Sabihin na natin, lahat tayo may pangangailangan. Lahat na tayo hindi kayang pondohan ng gobyerno. The government will help us much to its capability. That's why, Mr. Speaker, aside from quality, I beg and I appeal to the leadership of the Department of Public Works and Highways. Equitable distribution is the name of the game. Every Filipino family, every barangay, every district, every municipality, every province is worth taking care of. We should not prioritize others and forget others.
Thank you.
Being
Representative
equitable is
Garin.
actually being true to our commitment. Salamat po, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative
Thank you,
Garin.
distinguished sponsor.